Hello everyone. Come on. So this, don't mind that, it's my dinner. Just a shake. So this is part 4 of the Prince Eugene series. As far as I know, this is the final video so far. I don't know how many more they're going to make. But if they get more, and I don't know, then it's my first knife fight. That's me. Okay, so let's get into the video right now.
On November 1st, 1700, King Charles II of Spain died childless, bringing an end to almost 200 years of Habsburg family rule over the Spanish Empire.
Wow.
The closest heirs to the crown of Spain were Austrian or French. Whoever's house assumed control over the Spanish throne would rule over the Kingdom of Spain and her vast overseas empire. The death of the King of Spain left a vacuum in the balance of power between the most influential European nations. Within days of the sickly king's death, the news reached the palaces and courts of Europe's great powers, and it seemed as though they would become embroiled in yet another major war.
I can't move that box, so sorry. He made this important speech one day before I was born, although that year is very incorrect for me. I was born in 2019, obviously.
It had been less than 5 years since the conclusion of the last major conflict, the 9 Years' War, which ravaged Europe for a decade. King Louis XIV, known throughout Europe as the Sun King for his immense wealth and absolute power over the Kingdom of France, was interested in acquiring the Spanish crown for his family, the House of Bourbon. It was too good an opportunity for Louis to simply give up. This was a chance to shape the most powerful empire the globe had ever seen and truly live up to his title of the Sun King. Well aware of Louis's ambitions with Spain,
The Sun King? Like S-U-N King? Why was he the Sun King? Let me guess. Because he ruled everything under the sun. Had to be something like that, right?
his arch-rival Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor, contested the French claim to the Spanish throne. Fearing the loss of a balance of power in Europe if Louis was to acquire Spain, Emperor Leopold attempted to revive the Grand Alliance which had been formed against the Bourbons in the 9 Years' War, politically allying himself with the German states of the empire, as well as the King of England, who was also the stadtholder of the Dutch Republic, King William III, more commonly known as William of Orange. As everyone held their breath, the Protestants and the Bourbons decided to go down the path of peace to avoid another bloody conflict.
Good.
In 1698, dignitaries from France, England, the Dutch Republic, and the Holy Roman Empire convened at The Hague to agree to a diplomatic solution to the issue of the Spanish succession. On October 11, 1698, the Bourbon and Protestant diplomats finally agreed to a peaceful settlement with the signing of the Treaty of The Hague, also known as the First Partition Treaty. In the provisions of this treaty, the Spanish throne would go to Joseph Ferdinand Leopold of Bavaria, the 6-year-old son of Maximilian II Emmanuel, Elector of Bavaria. When the boy ascended to the Spanish throne, the French and Austrians would subsequently divide up the Spanish Empire amongst themselves. Peace and
I love this old way of no, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do what's best for all of us and not your country. So we're going to put a puppet king in charge of your country, and then we're going to divvy up what we want. Like, what? What?
Compromise had finally been reached. Then everything fell apart. Months later, Joseph Ferdinand died of smallpox, throwing all settlements and compromise plans out the window. The Bourbon and Protestant diplomats convened again in London the following year, and on March 25, 1700, signed the Treaty of London, or Second Partition Treaty. In this hastily arranged compromise, the new heir to the Spanish throne would be Archduke Charles of Austria, the youngest son of the Holy Roman Emperor. When the Spanish learned of the Treaty of London in mid-June of that year, Charles, amazingly still not dead despite years of aging health, amended his will in favor of Archduke Charles and again specified an undivided monarchy. Despite the bumpy road, the path to peace had at last been achieved. But in early September 1700, Charles became ill once more. His death seemed imminent. The pro-Bourbon faction managed to persuade the sick king to alter his will in favor of Philippe, Duke of Anjou, Louis XIV's grandson. Immediately...
Sorry.
I'm going to let you in on the best time of year to save money. It's all year. But I also want to treat myself to restaurant quality food. Purple carrot, plant-based.
I was going to mute it at the very end. It didn't make any sense to do that.
Immediately upon receiving the news at the court session, Louis was faced with an international dilemma. He faced two options. On the one hand, he could insist on maintaining the Treaty of London that made Archduke Charles of Austria the King of Spain, thus empowering his rivals. However, if Emperor Leopold refused the territorial concessions, France could call on England and the Dutch Republic to enforce the treaty. On the other hand, Louis could reject the Treaty of London and allow his grandson to accept the Spanish throne, thus uniting the Spanish and French realms under the House of Bourbon and creating his desired Franco-Spanish Empire.
Is that how you say it, Bourbon? Bourbon? I've always looked at it and said the House of Bourbon, but it's Bourbon. It clearly is not going to be the House of Bourbon, but that's how I look at it and I say it. Bourbon. Bourbon. Okay.
This would obviously result in a war with England, the Dutch Republic, and Austria.
Of course it would.
Weighing his options, Louis finally decided to take his chances and reject the Treaty of London, as Philip was proclaimed King Philip V. There would be war.
Of course there would be. I can't move that box, so sorry. You just have to pretend the words what you want them to be.
Following the ascension of Philip V to the Spanish throne, the French and Austrians began preparing for the war that was now inevitable. Both nations laid out strategies to achieve their aims. Geographically, Austria could at best seize the Spanish possessions in Italy without any outside aid. The Duchy of Milan, Kingdom of Naples, and Sicily were top contenders for Habsburg occupation. When word reached Vienna that Louis had accepted the Spanish throne for his grandson, Leopold ordered the occupation of Milan. His reasoning was that Milan, as an imperial fief, would de jure return to the Holy Roman Empire upon Charles's death. On top of this, imperial troops in Milan provided a safety net for Victor Amadeus, whose Duchy of Savoy would undoubtedly be overrun by French forces if they decided to move into northern Italy. Formally, no war had been declared, yet both sides were scrambling to prepare their armies for an inevitable clash. In February, French army regiments proceeded to occupy the Spanish Netherlands. Louis managed to upset the English people when his plot to meddle in England's line of succession was uncovered. Only Elector Max Emmanuel of Bavaria, Governor-General of the Spanish Netherlands, openly allied himself with France. This was seen as a betrayal by the English and Dutch. Northern Italy would become the scene of the undeclared war's opening maneuvers. Leopold appointed Prince Eugene of Savoy as the commander of imperial forces in the region. The haphazard preparations for war left much to be desired. Eugene spent the first weeks of 1701 painstakingly collecting and equipping his Austro-Imperial army for the coming Italian campaign. This delay allowed the French army to cross into the Duchy of Savoy, shockingly under the graces of Victor Amadeus, and move through the Alpine passes into the Po Valley of northern Italy. The newly organized French army of Italy, commanded by Lieutenant General René de Froulay, Comte de Tessy, occupied Milan. The newly styled King Philip V of Spain was recognized by Naples and Sicily. Following this, Victor Amadeus decided to marry off his youngest daughter, Maria Luisa Gabriela, to the new Spanish king, betraying Emperor Leopold and establishing an alliance with France. Now Prince Eugene would have an incredibly daunting task set before him.
I forgot all about this being Prince Eugene. I looked at it and I was like, where is he? Sorry. It's amazing that an army and its artillery had crossed dangerous precipitous mountains where there had been no roads before. That's pretty cool.
The energetic Marshal Nicolas de Catinat assumed command of the French army of Italy from Tessy. His goal in the region was to block any imperial attempt to cross the mountain passes. Catinat deduced that a nearby mountain pass at Verona was the most likely passage the Imperials would use, and so he set up a strong defensive line guarding it. Catinat believed his position was secure, since to the east the neighboring Republic of Venice was neutral. But in his vigorous preparations, Eugene had secretly reconnoitered passages over these mountains. In May,
Let's get to the fighting. Let's get to the brutality. Killing people. Maybe get a good sword like through one guy's cheek and then out his other side of his cheek and gets into the ear of someone else. Good family entertainment, you know?
In May, Eugene crossed the Adige with an imperial army organized into 4 marching columns and the army's supply and artillery train. An imperial detachment kept an eye on Catinat at Verona, while Eugene used the rugged mountain passes in the east to move his main army. Neutral Venice officially protested, but their words were hollow and without force to back it. Only when Eugene's army had arrived in the region did Marshal Catinat realize the danger that his own army was in. Unsure of Eugene's intentions, Catinat divided his army. Ironically, this served to weaken his entire defensive line. Instantly recognizing his favorable position, Eugene saw a lucrative prospect in overrunning the enemy forces nearby the village of Carpi. The village of Carpi was strategically located between the Adige River and the Canal Bianco at the end of a narrow defile between the Adige and large swampy marshes defending the entry into the Verona Valley. The French post at Carpi was defended by 3 entrenched positions. One at Castagnaro extending from the cemetery and the church to the Canal Bianco, one south of town branching out of the river, and one entrenchment in the village itself. On the morning of July 8th, Eugene found an unguarded opening in Carpi's position at the nearby town of Castagnaro. His army embarked on a march from their camps on the plain of Villa Buona. French commander Saint-Frémont camped at Carpi with his cavalry force of 16 squadrons from 5 horse regiments. His command was firmly entrenched around Carpi and Castagnaro. 3 Fusilier companies and 3 Grenadier companies occupied the
What is a Fusilier company? I didn't even know that word existed.
trenches around Castagnaro. General Tessy was camped with his division of 8 infantry battalions and 20 cavalry squadrons further north. Eugene's column, comprised of 11,000 men organized from the Alt Starhemberg and Bagny infantry regiments, 6 cavalry regiments, and 20 regimental cannons, marched along the dam on the right bank of the Canal Bianco towards where the Tartaro River flowed into the canal. As they reached a crossing, his troops began installing a pontoon bridge. On the opposite end of the riverbank, Prince Commercy's column encamped at Castel Guglielmo. Slightly smaller than Eugene's column, 7 battalions organized into 2 infantry regiments and 16 squadrons in 6 cavalry regiments, Prince Commercy's column marched along the Tartaro bank before installing a bridge at the crossing point.
He is with Prince Eugene, correct? Has to be. I guess I missed it. I did hear something about the other bank. Okay, yeah, never mind. Yeah.
Amidst the darkness to the north, meanwhile, Colonel Count Dawn departed from Castelbaldo, setting out to cross the Adige and to install his infantry and battery of artillery across the riverbank. A 4th column under General Borna did not make any river crossings, instead marching upstream along the Adige's banks, where he installed his artillery battery across from Carpi. Around 3 a.m. on the dark and rainy night, Eugene's and Commercy's columns finished crossing their pontoon bridges. Commercy's column ran into a small French picket detachment, but easily drove it back and scattered them with a few musket volleys. At this point, Commercy subdivided his column
That lightning strike was pretty cool.
in 2, keeping command of the Guido Starhemberg and Herberstein infantry regiments, as well as the Sereny and Dietrichstein dragoon regiments, and placing the Palffy, Lothringen and Taff cuirassier regiments under the command of General Count Palffy. Both columns were forced to cross rugged terrain with criss-crossing ditches and narrow roads that were little better than cart trails. This led to Commercy's 2 columns lagging behind Eugene's command and delaying them from uniting at Castagnaro. The French were unaware of the imperial movement until it was too late. Upon realizing they were about to be attacked, Saint-Frémont alerted his troops to take their positions. Battle was upon them. The general dispatched dragoons.
I saw this group and that group, and I was just like, oh, I didn't realize they were part of here. Okay, I kind of see what's happening. Okay.
From Carpi to Castagnaro, and then sent a messenger traveling north towards Tesse's division at Legnano. The French foot infantry defending Caternay, no more than 4 companies, were also dispatched into the trenches at Castagnaro. Meanwhile,
oh, man. It was a busy day today, so I apologize. I'm tired now. Back to the video.
Meanwhile, the courier reached Tesse at his camp. Tesse immediately set off towards Carpi at the head of his vanguard and pickets, instructing his generals to follow him as soon as they could with the rest of his division. At 6 a.m., the head of Eugene's column appeared in front of Saint-Frémont's entrenched outpost at Castagnaro. The Imperial artillery opened up a barrage on the outpost, marking the start of the Battle of Carpi. The grenadier companies of the Alt Starhemberg and Bagny infantry stormed the trenches. The attack was then quickly followed up by the rest of the foot companies in the 2 regiments. They rushed the entrenchments, but a French cavalry counterattack stagnated their advance. Reacting quickly, Eugene ordered a dragoon counterattack. The French resisted bravely and with fierce determination, but the Imperials finally succeeded in storming the Castagnaro outpost. Saint-Frémont realized they could not hold out for long against such overwhelming numbers. He dispatched another courier to Tesse to inform him of Castagnaro's imminent fall. Pressed hard in his front, Saint-Vraiment was forced to evacuate the outpost and retreat towards the village of Carpi. The French were pursued close behind by Eugene's cavalry squadrons, with some unfortunate infantrymen surrendering inside the city. Tese received a messenger informing him of the setback at Castagnaro. He sent a courier back to his main command with instructions to position his division at Villa Bartolomea and await further orders.
Oh.
Back on.
And now the cannons, since they've got them lured in, now the cannons are opening fire. Opening fire? Open firing? No. Opening. They're shooting the town.
On the battlefield, the Imperials found Catania abandoned and seized it without a fight. A brief lull ensued, with the Imperials and French collecting their soldiers. Once his forces were collected and reorganized,
they've opened fire. Opening fire, I think I said. Yeah, they've opened fire. That's, see, stupidity. And then it takes a minute for, if that was correct, opened fire.
Eugene ordered his troops to advance in 2 columns, flanked by cavalry on the left side.
You got to get these guys
The marshy
down here
terrain,
to move up.
canals and bushes proved to be an incredible challenge for the infantry to surmount. By now, Tese had arrived on the battlefield with his pickets. Upon learning of the Imperial advance, he wasted little time in planning his next move. He took command of Saint-Fremont's cavalry force and orchestrated a flanking maneuver against the disorganized Imperial columns. Tese sent the Ruffi cavalry regiment into a frontal charge against the Imperial infantry advancing on Carpi, while flanking the cavalry on the left. Concentrated and accurate volley fire from the infantry, combined with the arrival of the Vaudémont Cuirassiers regiment, halted the advance of the French cavalry and prevented their complete encirclement. The battle had now turned in Eugene's favor. The French cavalry resisted bravely, but the Imperial army had the advantage of close-range musket volleys tearing into their ranks of horsemen. Screams of the wounded and dying sprawled across the battlefield, littered the air, and casualties mounted on both sides. The Albert Dragoons launched a series of successful charges, while the Ruffi and Moroi cavalry regiments saw success in their own repeated attacks. But the steady fire of the Imperial foot soldiers supporting their cavalry inflicted severe casualties on these 3 French regiments, and finally brought an end to their attacks. Before long, the French realized they were at a significant disadvantage, but retreating was easier said than done in the marshy terrain. While locked in combat, a part of Eugene's infantry column broke through the French cavalry. They continued their rapid advance on towards Carpi.
What was the purpose then, if this is such a marshy terrain area? You got your back right up against the fort, the village, whatever. I mean, obviously, you got a river here. If you guys retreat, you have to cut across all of this. It doesn't seem like it was a good spot to. You rushed your people in there, and I understand the reasoning for the concept of it, but you've left your people with no retreat. It's just kind of death. I mean, you can try to forge the river. I say forge the river. You could try to swim the river. But then you got these guys over here. Yeah, this isn't looking like a really smart, thought out plan. I would have kept my guys here, I guess. What am I don't know what I would have done. I don't think I would have done this.
Seeing the Imperials break
I actually don't know what I'm talking about. I would have done this probably.
through the cavalry cover, Tese ordered a general retreat. The French cavalry officers had already been attempting to withdraw their troopers from the field, and after seeing their comrades in Carpi pack up and leave, they were further motivated to retreat. The retreat was
sloppy. It was anything but organized, I can say that. video will play after the ad. Who cares? Both of these people pretending to be friends. Shut your faces. All right, let's get to this. Oh, this is, yeah, I should do a video on the birth of a belt. So, you know, belts come in handy, and then video's over. And there you go. That was my birth of a belt.
The retreat was in relatively good order, with the Imperials taking stock and looting the French camp, rather than pursuing the fleeing Frenchmen. After successfully disengaging from battle, the French moved to Villa Bartolomea, regrouping and forming a new defensive line. The French had lost 3 colonels, 1 lieutenant colonel, 50 officers, and 300 men dead or wounded. An additional 110 soldiers were taken prisoner. Prince Eugene himself received a musket-shot wound to his knee. His casualties were 1 lieutenant colonel and 40 men killed, another 51 men wounded.
Oh, that hurts my knee.
Thanks to his victory at the...
Prince Eugene seems like somebody who doesn't... He thinks outside the box. That's all he does. And that's... Yeah, that's a tough person to fight.
Battle of Carpi, Eugene's army had successfully traversed a significant natural barrier, the Canal Bianco. He was now ready to launch further operations into the Duchy of Mantua, with his lines of communication well protected. Eugene's army now controlled the territory between the Adige and Mincio rivers, giving him ample freedom to move in whichever direction he saw fit. But the War of the Spanish Succession had only just begun, and the French did not plan on giving up northern Italy so easily. If you stayed around this far...
Okay, I'm going to guess they're still going to be making more videos. I will check in, unless somebody else knows. I don't know the average length of time it takes to make a video. So maybe I'll check in like a week or two. And then if it gets like to a month and I haven't heard anything, then I'll just hope somebody else reminds me, because I'll probably have forgotten by then. All right, I'm going to end this here. Like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Have a good day. Have a good night.